All right. So we're on the Imitation of Christ. We are on page 193, which is we got a little thing on the book 3 on interior conversation, and the chapter we're on is titled "Not Being Too Credulous." And we've been talking about quite a few very nice things. Um, not to be too overly dependent on other folks, not to be talking about them very much, or if you let's see what did he have to say. Don't confide your secrets in others unnecessarily, because you can know for sure at some point they're going to be let go, and you might as well not have to deal with having a bad feeling towards someone else because they did what really is natural in one sense. All right. And so tonight he continues on here. He says, "Grant that my words be true and constant, and drive far from me a sly and malicious tongue. What I am unwilling to endure, I certainly ought to use all means to avoid myself." All right. So that this one here, just it's basically that what I often tend to call truth is having that inner alignment. As people, especially as spiritual seekers, it really is fundamentally important for us that our words, our deeds, and our words, actions, and thoughts are all in alignment. That we don't act one way and think another. We don't say one thing and think another, or any combination thereof. We should always be in alignment. That our thoughts, words, and deeds back each other up. That they're the same. That prevents us from being a hypocrite. And also, it gives a great deal of power to what you have to say. People will listen to you if they come to know that you have that inner integrity about yourself. If they know that you are a person who does what they say, and that you're not two-faced, not fork-tongued, as they say. And this last one, that we should certainly avoid the things that we're unwilling to do. What I am unwilling to endure, I certainly ought to use all means to avoid myself. Right. And so if what we treat others the way we want to be treated, really things that we don't want to happen to us, we definitely avoid doing them to others. And that's that malicious and sly tongue, meaning don't be crafty, be straightforward, don't trick people into thinking something different than what you are. This is one of the reasons for the practice of confession. In the Catholic Church, it's to a priest, but in the church tradition that I grew up in, it was to each other. Confess your sins one to another, because it's important that we all understand that we're in this together. If everybody's pretending to be perfect, then who's going to be willing to ask for help? If we hang out in a sangha where everybody seems to be perfect, or seems to be towing the line without any problem, and not being honest about who they are, then where do I turn for help? How do I not feel ashamed? How do I not feel that guilt? And then how do I not then start hiding my stuff because I assume nobody else is having this trouble and I'm just too embarrassed to be open about it? And so this willingness to be vulnerable with each other is what is an important component of Sangha. That we not put on airs, don't pretend, because there's no benefit to it. All of us are going to get there by grace. None of us are going to get there because we're awesome people, right? None of us are going to get there because we're masters of ourselves at this point. All of us, and even if we do become masters of ourselves, it's because of grace. Grace inspired us.
Yeah.
Grace gave us the platform to stand on, and so we'll want to maintain that for our Sangha. And I really say that out loud for us all, because it's important for us to not have pretense. And so that's the other reason that we don't gossip. We don't discuss each other's weaknesses with others, unless we have the person's permission or unless they're in the room. with us, hearing us, because we want to maintain a safe environment where people can feel safe to admit they made a mistake, or that they have problems, or that they fall short, so that they don't feel like, oh gosh, they're going to talk about me as soon as I leave the room. I just confessed that I struggle with that, and now I don't want to leave the room because I don't want them to tear me apart. So we don't gossip for that reason. And this is, I've been a part of a lot of religious organizations where this is just a terrible problem. Gossip in the kitchen, while they're preparing food for the puja. I only know from people who talk to me, because people feel free to mention those things to me. And so I hear about it quite a bit, and that breaks my heart, because there's no way we can be an effective Sangha if we're infected with gossip, and if we're infected with pretense in trying to be better or put across a better air than what we are. Be what you are. That's the only way you can grow. Be what you are. That's the only way that we can foster trust amongst each other, and to be willing to get help when we need it, because that is one of the major points of Sangha, of holy company, is that ability to be there for each other, to be each other's strength, like that. So this is what he's pointing at here. How good and peaceful it is to remain silent about other people's words and deeds, not to believe without proof all that is said, nor lightly to repeat all that we see or hear. We should open our own hearts to very few, for it is better to seek you, Lord, who can see into every person's heart. Right? And so again, he's just really emphasizing that again. How good and peaceful it is to remain silent about other people's words and deeds. It's not up to you. It's not your place as a spiritual seeker to talk about other people. This is a hard lesson to learn because it's so juicy. We enjoy it a great deal. The ego loves to talk about other people's problems, other people's issues. And so it's again, we don't want to feed that ego, and talking about other people in negative ways like that feeds the ego, makes you feel better than them. So he's careful to say that. Not to believe without proof all that is said, right? If someone says something bad about someone else, don't automatically believe it, right? Find out from the person itself, and challenge the person. Call the person out on it. Say, hey, John's not here in the room. You shouldn't be talking about him when he's not in the room. That's a violation. That's egoism. That's destructive to our Sangha, our holy company. Call each other out, not in a self-righteous way, but just make a statement. That's not a good thing to do. And you yourself don't necessarily believe all that you hear said about others. And don't lightly repeat all that you see and hear, right? Don't go in the kitchen and be all piously silent and everything, and then run upstairs to the library and be like, oh my God, you won't believe what I just heard in the kitchen. Come over here. Shh. Don't tell anybody. Those are the first words of warning right there. Don't tell anybody. If as soon as somebody says that to you, say, don't tell me. If your instructions to me are not to tell anybody, then your instructions to you are don't you tell me, because this is not something we should be passing around quite clearly. We should open our own hearts to very few, right? So we're trusting, because if we open up indiscriminately and we get abused, or we become part of the gossip mill, I can tell you that that's very destructive for Sangha, because it takes a long time to forgive somebody for doing that to you, right? And so keep your cards close, not with pretense, not with the idea of appearing better, but be discerning about what you share with who, right? It's a matter of relationship. Not everybody has to know your deepest, darkest secret, right? Just your one or two people that you know and that you trust, you go to them with your deepest and darkest secrets. The others you can bring in as you like, but be discerning. He's telling us. He says that it's open your own hearts to very few, for it is better to seek you, Lord, who can see into every person's heart, right? And so our most honest relationship is that inner relationship with the divine presence, the divine beloved within you. And that's best by knowing that that divine presence and you are at least equally positioned. So really, you're doing this for yourself, carrying that inner integrity. You're doing for your own mental health, for your own friendships, for your own trust. It's just the right thing to be. It's what we are by nature, to have that kind of integrity. It is not for us to be wafted about by every wind of words, but rather to hope that both our interior and our outward life may be lived according to your holy will. And that's just that statement, that alignment. Words, deeds, and thoughts are always backing each other up. We're not two-faced. And the standard is to be like we would want our friends to be. To be like our inner self. We know when we're not acting properly. We know when we're not speaking properly. At least, unless we've become calloused about it. We've done it so much we don't even hear it anymore. Don't even pay attention to it anymore. And if that's the case, then you need to get into your spiritual practice a little deeper. If you're letting yourself get away with that, then your inner discernment is weak. And you're not going to have that inner strength to see the truth that is being presented inside, that God will reveal to you in that quiet time with her. That God does touch you by emphasizing your nature of Satchitananda. And any time that you act contrary to pure love, contrary to wisdom, something that's escapist, that takes you out of the here and now, takes you out of the moment, you should always be very sensitive about that, because that mother says that inner discernment should be going on as often as the clock ticks. We're always aware inside of whether we're being true to our nature or not. It's the reason we chant the names and glories of God, to remind us. It's the reason we do our mantra, to be aware of that presence of Satchitananda, the presence of God within, and to train the mind, to train the tongue, train the senses, to be in accordance with that rule of love that we carry within us. In order to possess heavenly grace, let us shun as far as we can all worldly conversation, not desiring what appears outwardly pleasant and agreeable, but diligently following those things which bring amendment of life and fervor. Right. So just light chit chat, also not necessarily a sign of good health. Right. That we're sober people. We have our fun. Ramakrishna definitely said there's a time for fish soup, right? He would tell somewhat off-colored jokes to his young disciples, and somebody, an older disciple, called him on it one time, and he said, "Oh, it's important to give them some fish soup every now and then. Don't put the clamps on too tight, but be responsible. Be responsible. Don't become that flighty." I could use myself. I wish I had a video of my old self, because there was a time in my life that's all I was just kind of a flighty source of entertainment, talking and giggling about nothing all the time, being witty, being sarcastic, just always having some little twist to everything I said. I remember, Greg actually has a personal experience of that. I don't know if he remembers that or not, because when I first joined the monastery, I couldn't stand it when nobody was saying anything at the dinner table. It made me so nervous, because that's dinner party rule number one: never let the conversation die at the table. And so I would always try and keep things going at the dinner table. And one day after lunch, I don't know if you remember, Greg, but you pulled me aside in the kitchen and you just said, "Hey, Vance, we don't always have to talk at dinner. You can let it be quiet." And
there was a guy who came to the monastery in Alima at the retreat, because the retreatants used to eat with the brothers, and no one felt like talking that day, just because. And he's looking around at everybody and says, "Is everything okay?"
Yeah. No, in the world, it's
fine.
not.
No one's talking. That's all.
Yeah. And that I had to learn. When you told me that, it made me aware of something that I did not know was okay. I honestly, just, I was very uptight about silence at the table. Unfortunately, after 15 years there, I learned. Swami and I had many meals where we sat and ate in absolute silence, didn't say a word to each other. And that was fine. It's peaceful. That's wonderful. That's how you help quiet the mind, right? That's how you get that interior silence that is necessary for proper discerning, so that you can see the impulses of mind and body before they affect you. Whereas if you're constantly involved in your personality and decorating yourself with witticisms and clever sayings and knowledge, you're not going to be able to find that inner silence, because that's going to become inner habit as well as outer habit. So we should diligently follow things which bring amendment of life and fervor. Those things that inspire our devotion, that inspire our desire to go farther, to be more like our ideal, and the amendment of life, things that are helpful toward fixing the things that we know are wrong. Being more spiritually oriented, acting like a spirit more than we act like a body. And the spirit is very still. The spirit is full of truth, full of a gentle love that's always humming. So the smile is always in the eyes, the joy is always in the heart, but we're not necessarily making a deal of that outside. Our words are few. It's one thing I always really appreciated about Swami Vedananda. He didn't waste words. He wasn't a person that talked a lot. And I went to an interfaith meeting with him one time, and everybody would talk over everybody at the table. Of all these different leaders from different faiths around the table. And I noticed and was very proud when I saw it. Whenever Vedananda spoke up, which was very rare, he didn't often say anything about stuff that was being talked about. But when something needed to be said and he said it, he was one of the only people at the table where everybody else was quiet when he spoke. And I think that's because he did have that inner integrity. What he said, what he thought, and what he did were the same. And his words were carefully chosen. And he didn't waste words. He didn't speak frivolously very often, if ever, actually. And so that has an effect on the people around us. It has an effect on ourselves. And it's the way that holy atmosphere builds. And as spiritual seekers, there's nothing more wonderful than to be in a room where the atmosphere is holy, where the atmosphere is still and inspiring. And so we are the divinity within us is the source of that. So we have to allow it to come out by controlling our egoism, controlling our love of our personality, our love of people pleasing, all these these things that I start getting tense when I talk about them, because I've got a lot of work in all those areas to do. A virtue that has been known and praised too hastily has harmed many a soul, while one kept in silence has proved beneficial in this uncertain life of temptation and warfare. It's a very good point. We often think that if we have something nice to say to somebody, we should say it. Not necessarily. It's nothing wrong with saying it. But he says, if you say it, if you're too quick with your compliments, too hasty in them, and you repeat them often, you could become a stumbling block to the other person, because that person may be taking it as an ego boost. Oh, I'm a pretty good person. Everybody today complimented my singing, or complimented my lecture, or complimented whatever, right? And so there are ways of doing it, without doing it. Don't be hasty in making multiple compliments towards somebody, but every now and then touch somebody on the shoulder and say, I really appreciate having you around. You've really been a great effect in my life. Something simple like that. That's not a particular thing that their mind can focus on and become proud of, but a general kind of encouraging thing. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're around. I've always enjoyed you being here. That will have the same effect of giving them a boost without encouraging egoism, right? Because that's a matter of heart. That's a heart saying something. It's not something about an action. It's not something about an accomplishment or a talent or whatnot. It's something about a disposition, a heart, and it will be taken that way. All right, chapter 46. on putting our trust in God when evil words are spoken against us. Oh God, this is a tough one. This is a really challenging one. Christ is talking. He says, my child, stand firm and trust in me. What are words but only wind? They fly through the air, but hurt not a stone upon the ground. Right? So don't the words, he's saying, have discernment about the words. If the words are, if they're against you, if they're evil, he says, hear them, but don't. They're just words. Don't take them in. Let your discernment catch them. And before you get offended by them or hurt by them, let discernment catch them. Look at the content of them. Examine yourself. Say, are they true? Am I like that? Did I do that? Is that true? And if it's true, then offer it to mother. Say, mother, I'm sorry. I don't want to be that. I won't do it again. Just like Brother Lawrence taught us. Then we set it aside. We move on. We don't mention it again. We don't hold on to things. We don't let echoes ruin our day by replaying a thought over and over and over again. If you are innocent, then you will gladly suffer such words for the love of God, right? If you didn't do it, then you just got some karma burned off. So good for you. Keep going, right? And let him go. Don't get incensed. That's always the sign of egoism. Anytime you're annoyed, anytime you're offended, anytime you're wounded, you can always know that's the boundary of your ego. Mother may have let that happen to make you aware of where your ego is starting so that you can reduce it. You can bring it in. If it's not true and it has nothing to do with you, be glad, that your ego took a blow and your bad karma got lessened a little bit, and let it go equally. Let it go. Don't hold on to anything, good or bad, right? Catch it with your discernment. Look through yourself. Is it true or false? If it's true, then make your amends and move on and forget. If it isn't true, then thank God, that he burned up some of your karma, and forget and keep going. Go forward. If, on the other hand, you are guilty, determine willingly to make amends. It is a small matter for you to put up with a few words uttered in haste when you are yet unable to bear the hard blows. It is because you are still worldly and are eager to please others that you take such little things to heart. Oh, there's the hard teaching right there. To take it personally, to hold on to it, to let it hurt you, to stop talking to that person, to stop, whatever, avoiding that person or not helping that person anymore, whatever it is. If you do that, it's just your egoism. It's your people pleasing that has been offended. It's your ego that's been wounded. Don't pay that any attention. Let that ego die. As much opportunity as you get to let that ego just go, the better off you are. In that way, have the fewer opinions you have about anything, the better off you'll be, the happier you'll be. If you don't have to have an opinion on it, don't form one. Don't form opinions about unnecessary things. You just set yourself up for offense. So it says, it is because you are still worldly and are eager to please others that you take such little things to heart. When you resent being corrected for your faults and seek shelter in excuses, it is because you are afraid of being despised. Right? Seek shelter in excuses. Wow. That's actually something I learned in the monastery quite quickly with Swami. If he said something to you, if he corrected you on something, the worst thing you could do is come back with an excuse. That was the worst thing you could do. You would just feel it inside. It's like, it would, because he wouldn't accept it, and you would just feel it echo right back to you, and you'd be like, yes. So when you resent being corrected for your faults and seek shelter in excuses, it is because you are afraid of being despised. Search your soul carefully, and you will discover that the world is still strong in you, as well as that impossible desire to please others. Right. So he's telling us exactly what we know. Discernment, discernment, discernment. Always watching inside, you know, and just being aware. You don't have to guard. That word is sometimes used, guard yourself inside. I don't really like that because that's not necessary. Just discerning itself is enough because Satchitananda is constantly emanating within you. And that is the self-correcting mechanism. Guarding suggests that you have some kind of weapon or something that you're going to do. You don't need a weapon. You just need awareness. And when you become aware of a fault, it is in your nature to amend that. You feel that is what being brings about. And so just by being aware of a fault, that's enough. Satchitananda will begin its work of removing it. For when you dread to be abased, to be torn down, and humiliated for faults, it is clear that you are not truly humble, nor dead to the world, nor is the world crucified to you. Just listen to my word, and you will not mind, even if 10,000 people speak against you. Right? So this is that important thing about the spiritual self also, is that we're defined by our inner world, not by what people are thinking or saying about us. That's one of the most natural byproducts of a good practice, is a steady nature. It doesn't matter to you, if people are saying things about you or not. You're not defined by your environments. You have begun to carry your own atmosphere in your own shrine within the temple of your body. And that's where we want to go. That's how we want to be. That is our nature, to be like that. We are the temple. This body is the temple of the divine. And within that temple, if you do your worship and your constant awareness of the presence on the shrine in there in the heart, that atmosphere will begin to emanate, would be felt. Again, talking about Swami Prabhupada, I didn't really know he was that way for a long time until he went away to India for 6 weeks and left me in the monastery alone. And I have to say, the experience of being alone in that monastery was radically different from when he was there. It did. It took more effort to do things. It took more effort to get to the shrine. It took more effort to calm my mind. It took more effort to do my work and to do my duties. But when he was there, he had with him, and he had his life with him, which was a constant reminder. His stoic nature was a constant reminder of what was right and what was good. And it became so much easier. And I really learned that, or really saw that, that when he would come back, even that very next day, things would be more on track with the way they should be than the first day after he left. Even if all the evils, which the worst of human malice can invent, were said against you, what harm can they possibly do you if you pay no attention to them? They cannot take so much as one hair from your head. Right? If they're not true and they've been spoken, it does not matter. They cannot remove even one hair from your head. There's that saying, oh, the lady doth protest too much. If you come out as defensive, oh, that makes it look like you're guilty, right? If it just doesn't bother you and you don't feel a need to react to it, oh, then that's pretty much evident that really it probably isn't true, right? Because the ego didn't feel the need to protect itself. The ego didn't get provoked in there. But if you do not keep your eyes fixed on God, nor keep him in your heart, then you will be easily upset by the slightest rebuke. You see, this is why this constant emphasis on practice. I've been doing a lot of thinking and just kind of contemplating, kind of opening up, trying to open up to understand, what is it to have a center? What is it to be a sangha? What are we up to here? What is our thing here? And one of the things I really am seeing in the mother is that our time together on Sundays, that's not when we get trained. That's not when we get taught. Quite often we think we go to church for the lecture, or we go to church for the teachings. That's not where that happens. That happens in your practice every day, when you're sitting there doing your studies and sitting there and praying with your beloved and having that conversation with your beloved. And on Sundays, you come not to see what you can get, you come to share the fruit of your practice. You come to share the love that you've learned. You've come to share the inspiring things that you've read. You come to give us your practice with each other. It's your opportunity to practice love, to practice trust, to practice encouragement, to practice forgiveness, to practice, gentleness and joy, selflessness. So Sangha, you come here to give those things to who? To the divine within each one of us. That's the highest form of worship. So we come to the temple to worship. And how do we worship? By honoring each other, by honoring the spirit within each other, seeing God in each other. And so our worship, the highest worship, is not to come and pitch an apple on the altar or to throw a flower at a picture. The highest worship is to come and encourage your brothers and sisters. It's to come and to be kind and to be attentive and to genuinely want the very best for each other. That is our worship, and that's where the meaningfulness happens, is there, but it is rooted in your practice. And if you're not doing your practice and you come on Sundays and you pretend all of this, forget it. Well, there's nothing to that. It's not going to add much to the flame at all. So do your practice, be dedicated to your practice. Oh, I can just feel Mother's finger poking me right in the middle of the chest. Do your practice, Chidbram. Do your practice. Yes, because that's where it all happens. That's where you're going to find all the bliss that you need. That's where you're going to find all the grace that you need. That's where you're going to find all the love that you need. And if you aren't finding it there, what do you think you have to give and to share with the rest of the world? How will you ever worship if you have not picked the flowers through your practice to offer to the Lord on Sundays? All right. That's the order of things. Number one is your practice. Number two is the Sangha and on making your offering to each other as worship. All right, chapter 46, on putting our trust in God. Wait. No, that's the wrong place. Over here. So this is what he's saying, number 3 here. But if you do not keep your eyes fixed on God, nor keep him in your heart, then you'll be easily upset by the slightest rebuke, right? That's what led us into this talk of practice. Those who trust in me and rely not on their own judgment will fear no human, for I am the judge and the discerner of all secrets, right? So if you know that you're right with your beloved, if your conscience is clear within, if you're doing that work of constantly sitting in the presence, nothing can move you. Nothing can push you out of that space. That is what it means to be established. And what is the byproduct of being established in the shrine of the heart like that? Being that person of steady wisdom. You're not moody, you're not unstable, you're not easily swayed. You are that pillar. I know how everything is done, and I know both the one who inflicts the injury and the one whom it affects. Nothing happens without my permission and the power so to act, that out of many hearts thoughts may be revealed. I will judge both the guilty and the innocent, but I will test them both beforehand. So just leave these things to the divine. Somebody comes, or you hear that somebody's saying bad things about you, don't get upset about it. Don't get pulled out. Catch it with your discernment. We already did that. If it's true, make your amends and move on. If it's not true, let it go and move on. And just keep doing that. Don't feel like you have to go get even, or don't feel like you have to go slap that person for saying that thing about you. That's not yours. Leave it to the mother, right? You didn't make those bad words happen, so you're not responsible for fixing them. Just leave it to the mother. Say, ouch, Ma, that hurt. Bless that person. May I not hold it against them, in that way. Human judgment, right? Human judgment is judgment made according to the values of body mind. That's erroneous judgment. Those judgments that come from egoism, from our place of a particular perspective. Human judgment is often erroneous. My judgment is true. Who is my? My is Satchitananda, that divine principle. That judgment is always true. Whenever we look in the mirror in the face of pure love, we know what is right and what is wrong. Whenever we sit in the silence of pure wisdom, we know what is right and what is wrong, because we carry it within us. That's who we are. It shall stand and can never be overthrown. Right? Satchitananda can never be overthrown. It will win. That was one of the wonderful things that I learned during when I was really struggling with my depression. One of the very healing moments was when, I went in, I went into that dark place. I just kind of allowed myself to go into all that hurt that was going on in there. And I didn't try to change anything. I just imagined myself setting down a torch on a stick, a light, and planting it there and saying to myself, love is going to win here. And then I went back outside, and I started doing that with some regularity. Anytime I really felt that depression, that sadness, that hopelessness that would come inside, I would just go. I would just allow myself to sink into that place, and I would find the center of it. And I would go put a little light there. And I would just make the declaration loud so that I could hear it echo in that dark. I would say, love will win here. And I would stand and meditate on that for a moment and then come out and go on. Righteous persons are never dismayed by anything I permit to happen to them. This is that accepting the moment and making gold. Right? Every moment is perfect as it is, no matter what's happening to us, no matter how bad it seems. And the first lesson is always the moment is very rarely perfect for a body, but you are not the body. The moment is very rarely perfect for the mind, but you are not the mind. The moment is always perfect to the self. Right? And so by accepting the moment as it is, will train us to identify with self automatically, to know who we really are. And so we accept the moment and whatever it brings, and we apply Satchitananda to it and give it back as our gift to the beloved, as our offering, as our worship. So in that, accepting the moment is perfect. What God says, I am everywhere present and always perfect. Righteous persons are never dismayed by anything I permit to happen to them, right? Because through practice, we come to know everything that happens to us is motivated by love. We know that because the universe is created on the divine principle of an unconditioned love and of an infinite wisdom. And so when something hard happens to us, we just go about the method of trying to see it properly. Ramakrishna says, whenever you say the world is going to the dogs, he says, just think for a moment that perhaps you're not seeing things rightly. Perhaps you're not seeing things rightly because I have permitted it to be as it is. So find the love in my action. What am I trying to show you? Am I trying to get you to detach from something? Am I trying to get you to serve something? Am I trying to get you to break a habit? Am I trying to get your ego out of the way? These are all acts of love from God in the moment that can make the moment seem like it's not perfect, right? And so that's why we accept it as perfect. And then we do the work to find that perfection. And then we take that moment to apply Satchitananda to it and let it go as worship. And that's Karma Yoga. So righteous persons are never dismayed by anything that I permit to happen to them. Although they be wrongly accused, it will not worry them much. Neither will they be overjoyed if they be reasonably acquitted. They know that I am the searcher of all hearts, who judge not according to outward appearances or by the way things look to humans, but by what I esteem praiseworthy. What is of Satchitananda, right? So that Satchitananda is the only worthy judge. And that's why Vivekananda says, accordingly, the only way to judge your spiritual progress is those two questions. Am I unselfish, right? And am I loving? Those are the only two measures of spiritual life. Am I unselfish and am I loving? Those, if you want to know how close to God you are, ask yourself those two questions. And to the degree that you can affirm those two qualities in yourself, to that degree, you are knowing the beloved. You are moving forward in spiritual life.
I have a question, Swami.
Yes.
How do we balance that with the earlier statement of not opening our hearts to everyone? So,
well,
oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the not opening our hearts to everyone was accompanied by a second instruction. Open your heart entirely to God.
Okay.
Okay. So that's what's necessary in order to work out the perfection of the moment. The not opening our hearts entirely to everyone is just a cautionary teaching, so that you don't get into a situation where you poison Sangha because of your overly trusting. It's the image I'm getting in my mind is one time the car I had left, the Mercedes, the monastery car, which happened to be an old Mercedes, unlocked, and Swami had walked outside and had seen that the car was left unlocked. And so he came up and he said, I noticed that the car was not locked. And I said, oh, Maharaj, I'm sorry. I thought it was for our own protection that I had done that. But that wasn't Swami's concern. His concern wasn't about protecting our stuff in the car. He told me he followed up the teaching by saying, you see, if you leave the car unlocked, you tempt the person who might not have been tempted by a locked car. And so it because we are part and parcel of someone's fall, of someone's mistake. We tempted them with an unlocked car. That was his perspective on it. So it's kind of along those lines. That's, we're protecting ourselves to a degree. He's not saying don't open your hearts up to everybody. He says just be discerning. Have a few people that you really trust, but most of your honesty is between you and the beloved, right? That's where you find your real refuge. Don't put too much dependence on others, because we're all in this together. We're going to all make our mistakes, and we're going to all let each other down from time to time. That's the nature of it. And so we don't place undue burden on ourselves or on others by taking to Sangha what really should go to the Lord. Our ultimate refuge really is in the beloved. And to the degree that we grow in our strength, to that degree we can trust our Sangha as well. Right? It's a careful thing. It is an odd teaching in a way, but it's kind of it's a training wheel teaching. As long as the ego is strong and sensitive, then be careful who you share stuff with, lest you get hurt. But once that ego has been effaced and you're pretty much strong and not moved too much by what others do and say, then you can open your heart more to others that way. It's safer for you to do that. So it's a training wheel teaching. Does that help at all?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Number 5, Lord God, most just judge, strong and patient, you know the frailty and the malice of human beings. I beseech you to be my strength and my guide, for my conscience of itself is not sufficient, You know what I do not know, and that even under reprimand I ought to humble myself and bear it meekly. For as often as I have not acted thus, in your great mercy forgive me, and give me the grace of greater endurance for the future. So this is the prayer. This is the prayer that kind of brings all of this teaching together, right? It is the divine relationship that we depend on the most. And it is the presence of God within that we depend on the most, more than our own thoughts about ourselves, more than our own conscience, more than our own judgment. We depend on placing ourselves in the constant presence of God, because that's what Brother Lawrence did it. 10 years he did it before it became a permanent feature of himself. 15 years he did it, and it was a sense, a flow of bliss in him that he said was so intense that he had to come up with ways of disguising it, lest it cause trouble in the monastery, because he had such a flow of bliss going through him. The torrent of your mercy is the surer and more profitable way for me to obtain your forgiveness, right? Than my protesting the innocence of my inmost conscience. Okay, you see, this is the role of grace. If we think that our goodness is coming from ourselves, that our progress is coming from ourselves, if we judge ourselves according to achievements and accomplishments in spiritual life, there's no room for grace in that. There's egoism in that. And so what's he say? He says, the torrent of your mercy is the surer and more profitable way for me to obtain your forgiveness, right? So this is how we obtain God. It's through the grace of God, through a dependence and an acknowledgement and an imbibing of that grace. Because to the extent that you know that grace, to that extent you'll be inspired to be free of ego. To that extent you'll be inspired to transcend these lower things of body mind. So the torrent of your mercy is the surer and more profitable way for me to obtain your forgiveness than my protesting of the innocence of my inmost conscience. Although my conscience may not accuse me of any fault, thereby I am not justified. For if you withhold your mercy, no one living is righteous, right? So our value comes from the fact that God loves us immensely. That's how we know our value, not by our achievements, not by our accomplishments, not by our strength, not by anything. It is because of our knowledge that the beloved is deeply in love with us. And there must be something in there that is lovable for God to love us so much. There must be something in there that is valuable for God to have made so much effort to reach us, to forgive us, to show mercy, to lift us up, to help us find transcendence. There must be something worthwhile in you that inspires the patience that God shows, the constancy that God shows in his dedication to us. So that is where we find our justification. That's where we find our confidence before the beloved. That's where we find our relationship with truth, is rooted in the mercy and the love of God. And that's where we find our self-worth and our self-esteem. Nothing else will do. Everything else creates ego, creates a false sense of self that remains separate from God. All right. So that is a good place to stop for this evening.